In Midnight Special, a young boy with extraordinary abilities is transported across the country with both the authorities and a cult in pursuit. This movie harkens back to the science fiction stories from the 1980s, but with a modern indie thriller aesthetic. So join us as we discuss Midnight Special. Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
I come in peace.
This is a science fiction movie podcast. We get together and talk about a movie. It's that simple. And in today's show, we're looking at a Patreon vote winner. I don't remember what the other choices were. It doesn't matter. The winner was Midnight Special, a film that came out in 2016, directed by Nichols, and stars, well, a whole bunch of people really, but Michael Shannon and Joel Edgerton at the top of the list for sure. So we'll get into it. We'll start spoiler free, of course, as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we go into the spoilers. And if you are enjoying the show on YouTube, please do hit the like button. It helps us out a bunch. And of course, you can get bonus shows from us and other goodies and extras over at Patreon and help support everything. But I'll tell you more about that at the end of the show. So Midnight Special is a movie about a young boy, 8 years old, who is on the run with his father and his father's friend, and the context of why they're on the run is something that would be a spoiler to say up front, but because it's obviously starting off in a sort of very mysterious circumstance. But there's multiple people, including the authorities, looking for them, and what their goal is, again, is like a mystery that the movie kind of unfolds as it's going. There's going to be very little we say, really, before we get to spoilers, so just keep that in mind.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Yes,
I thought the spoiler line would have been a little bit further, so now I'm trying to re-edit my initial feelings here so I don't give anything away.
Yeah, I'll just say that there's something special about the boy, right? He's there's something different about him. He's got some sort of abilities, and that's kind of why he's important. So I mean, I'll say that for sure. But otherwise, I would say it's got a very kind of low-key, thriller kind of vibe to it, but there's kind of this hope and optimism kind of squeaking through at times as well. It's definitely kind of unique in that sense, so we'll be talking about kind of all that as we go through. But I had seen this before. I'm pretty sure I saw this in theaters when it came out, but that was 9 years ago, so a lot of it had faded in my memory, although I did remember liking it. I assume this was a first-time watch for you?
Yes, so I do have a little bit of prior experience with the director. I had a completely casual, barely paying attention viewing of Take Shelter, which I believe was also by him, and it was good. I remember it being good, but again, it wasn't something I was giving a full attention to. It was just kind of on in the background while I was hanging out with other friends. So I remember being okay with that movie, at least with what I remember of it.
Yeah, I remember liking Take Shelter well enough. The movie I really liked from this director that I'd seen before this, though, was Mud, which is not science fiction by any means, but I remember being kind of really surprised by how great that was when I saw it when it came out. I actually haven't really kept up with what he's done since. He did a movie last year from 2023 called The Bike Riders, which has had a bit of critical acclaim with Tom Hardy. So I may have to seek that out or find a reason for us to do it in collector's cut at some point so I can watch it. But he had a little string here of doing and it's not even they're all, because I mean Take Shelter's got a little bit of a sci-fi twist in it as well. This has a bit more sci-fi in it, but Mud didn't. Mud was just a drama with a little bit of a thriller element thrown in, so it's not like he was sticking to one thing, but definitely there was some sort of thematic and kind of tonal through lines that were happening throughout them. There's definitely tension in all of these films, at least the ones that I've seen anyway. So
and also Michael Shannon seems to be there all the damn time.
Well, he wasn't in Mud.
Oh, was he not?
No.
Fair enough.
I mean,
just looking through the Bike Riders, Take Shelter, and this, Mike Shannon seems to be the overarching through line here.
He definitely works with him a lot. I mean, I don't remember him in Mud. Maybe someone will correct me and say he had a smaller role, but Matthew McConaughey was the lead in Mud at the very least. But gotcha. So we'll get into it. David, what did you think of Midnight Special?
So it's a movie that's been done a lot before. It's a movie that I feel like I've seen this style of. It's your kind of E.T. in a way. It's a bunch of people find something that's special. They have to go on a road trip to get it to this special place. Like, it's been done in a lot of ways before. And I think that if this is the first time that you're seeing that kind of movie, I think that it's perfectly good. I think there is like nothing wrong with it in terms of doing that style. It's got like you said, a good tension to it. I think the characters, the build up, all that works well. The plot is very tight, and it does a good job of really not doing too much extraneous stuff that isn't like super necessary for understanding what's going on. However, I don't think it really does anything out of the ordinary or like too big or too like new with it. It feels like it is kind of exactly what I expected once I got the gist of this movie, and it doesn't really do anything else on top of that. So it's a kind of middling like from me. Again, like it doesn't do anything wrong, but it doesn't do anything new either. It's just the same movie that I've seen a couple of other times, especially in like the 80s. I feel like we got the most of these coming out. So yeah, I guess that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Interesting. I quite like it. I think that while there are similarities to other movies, in some ways it feels like a more serious, grounded, well, maybe grounded's not the right word, but like a more serious, darker version of something like a Starman, as opposed to, you said E.T.
Right.
I don't know if I quite get that comparison, but like a Starman or just something like that where, like you say, it's about going cross country and there's kind of like a sense of purpose and there's people chasing and all that kind of thing. But this is definitely right from the get-go establishes itself as having this sort of more dark thriller tone where there's characters willing to kill to succeed in this goal. It's not like this light-hearted romp. It's not this, constant kind of heartwarming with a little bit of cheese. It's not that. And there's definitely some implications you can read into as to like how different people who are interested in what's going on and like how they want to exploit the situation also has kind of some undertones to it. But yeah, I mean, I get the comparison to those things. For me, it's all about the execution. It's all about how well it's shot, how good the atmosphere is, partly because of the music. The performances are very, very good. It's a movie that knows what tone it's trying to go for and succeeds quite well in doing that. And I think that's what sticks out to me about this the most is that, yeah, I can see the skeleton of this type of movie from the 80s, but it's got a very, very different tone and a very sort of modern feel to it that's very different to how those movies felt. And I think in that sense, it's an interesting film. Now, I mean, admittedly, it's been a while. I don't remember it too well, but I did definitely like this more than Take Shelter, from what I recall. That said, though, I do think Mud's the best film I saw from Jeff Nichols. I really liked Mud. But as soon as this started, as much as I hadn't like sought out the film again to watch it until now, like as soon as this started, I was drawn in immediately. Like the way the movie starts with, characters sneaking about in the dark, get into a car, there have been some rumblings of some setup. You hear the news in the background saying that this kid's been kidnapped and, look for this man. There's a big picture of Michael Shannon's face and they're sneaking to a car. Like that's how the movie kind of starts. And it feels like you're there with the tension of like trying to avoid anyone watching or any lights or any cameras. And we have to drive at night on the road. And there's a lot of reasons why a lot of these things are happening, which we'll get into in spoilers, but it just kicks you off with a really simple, we have to not be seen. And there's already so much tension before you start to get a lot of the context that comes later on. And I think that stuff is very well handled and it draws me in. I do think that maybe the back half loses a little bit of steam to an extent. I think I like the ending a lot, but I do think that maybe the build up to the third act starts to there's like a little chunk at the end of the second act, start of the third act, which feels a little bit more, I guess, generic, that doesn't quite feel as special as the rest of it. And I think that is maybe a fair critique.
I think I agree with you. It did draw me in. I was very interested in the first bit, but without spoiling too much, there are 3 parties, I would say, that are all vying for like the goal here. They're all vying for trying to get this to work out in their favor. And I think that the party I was the most interested in, that seemed the most interesting to me, is kind of the one that falls by the wayside the most. And that's kind of where I started to feel like it was getting into more generic territory. Once that third party is kind of written entirely out of the plot, they're just entirely left out of the climax of this movie. And I don't know, I feel like that's where it kind of started really losing me, is when it felt more generic and more like this isn't anything that I haven't already seen before. I agree with you with the tone aspect, where, you know, this is something where, oh, people can kill and they're willing to go this extra mile for it. But I don't know. I feel like I just have seen enough of those sort of things where it's like this other movie, but more grim and dark. Like, it doesn't exactly fall into Starman, but grim dark. But I do kind of get that once we hit this back end.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because I think one of the things I felt when I saw this. So keep in mind, this came out in 2016, right?
Mm-hmm.
This was the same year as Batman v Superman. It was a couple of years after Man of Steel. And I remember one of the feelings I had at the time when this came out is, despite the tone and despite all the characters willing to kill and the darker kind of themes that it was maybe playing with, it still felt like a better Superman movie than Batman v Superman, because there's still this sort of central heart and like hope in the middle of it. And I realize that people might be thinking I'm getting a bit spoilery here by saying that. I'll just say it up front: the kid's not an alien from another planet, okay? So just let that out. There's some core reasons why we would compare it to that type of story, and not just because he's literally reading a Superman comic at one point. Also a Teen Titans comic, because I saw Starfire, and one of the comics. I was like, he's reading some Teen Titans.
That was like, that's the other thing is, I will say that this movie has a very indie tone to it, despite being a studio movie. It is a Warner Brothers one, but it definitely has a lot more of that indie feel coming into it. And that's not a bad thing. I think that it actually does wonders to help this movie, because it's kind of having you expect less in terms of what comes out of it. And then they can go big and really blow your mind with certain sequences.
Yeah. It has a little bit more of a backbone in the budget to do some particular moments, which is really nice when they come, because it's fairly low key most of the time. So when they do like a big moment, it does feel like, oh, the spectacle here that I wasn't quite like braced for, because the movie's not constantly doing that. So I think that's also pretty nice. I mean, I get the critique, but I think it just worked a bit more for me than it did for you. While I do agree it's not one of the best things of all time, or by any stretch either. I think it's just a really solid movie with a concept that it handles really well, and I think it's fairly satisfying by the end. Although there is an argument to say that if the entire film felt as like unique and special as the first like 30 minutes, it might have been just a special movie overall, like something where you'd be really singing the praises of by the end. As it is, I think it's a really solid movie that will probably fall through the cracks in time, and only people who were around when it came out will remember it, and some people will be into it. But we have I still think this is a really solid movie, and I think it's there's a lot of movies we have done that I think people like more than this that I think are much worse than this. Which is a weird sentence, but I know what I mean when I say it.
Right. I get what you're saying in that this one has a certain quality to it. I'm not doubting that there is that quality to it. For me, it is really just this thing where the tone that worked for you, I feel like the drop off was just more severe than it was for you, where by the time we hit the halfway point, I'm already knowing like pretty much where this is going top to bottom. Yes, there are a few details that mix it up, that change things up slightly, but the general beats are exactly the same things I've seen before. And that's not inherently a bad thing, but it kind of kills that tension aspect of it when I don't feel like I'm going to be surprised at any point.
Do you think that if there was even if the general outcome was still the same, if there was a lot more opposition in that sort of final hurdle to get to the location, do you think that would have spiced it up a lot? Because that's one of the things I felt, is that it felt a little easy still somehow, despite all the all the things they actually already set up.
I think opposition in the end definitely would have helped it more. The other two things I was kind of feeling is, like I already said, there's a third party that's involved with all this that kind of gets written out of the movie. I think that they were the most intriguing part of kind of the lore of this, of how this all came to be. And they're not really explored that much, which kind of leads into my third point of, I kind of wanted there to be just a little bit more of the weirdness. Like every once in a while we'll dip into showing like, okay, here's part of his power set, here's something that he does as this special kid. But I didn't feel like by the end of it I kind of either got enough weirdness or enough of a explanation or like rundown of all the stuff that happened before the movie. There's kind of just this gloss over where they say, yeah, he was a weird kid and he did some weird stuff and so we treated him differently. But like, I would have much rather have either seen that stuff happen in the current day or be told much more explicitly what happened back then, just to really drive it home.
I think I disagree with that to an extent. I like the idea of exploring more of that third party's like world and their beliefs and all that. I don't think I want them to get like, I think the amount of vagueness of exactly how the kid was treated before the film started, I think is just the right amount. Just these little, insinuations here or there, these little things that kind of imply how he was being used, I think is just the right amount. So I think I disagree with seeing more of that or getting more overt explanations of it. But I do think further exploration into this group and maybe more of their their point of view by the time we get to the end of the movie. Like it'd have been interesting if like some people from that group got to witness some of the stuff in the third act just to see their reactions and see how they interpret it and how they react to it. That I think that would have been something that I would have been interested in for sure.
Yeah. Also, I mean, again, not trying to spoil much of anything here, but the authorities, who are the second group here, they get involved with this and their reason for getting involved makes sense. But by the time we hit the end of the movie, I don't feel like I fully understand the grasp of what they're hoping to get out of this. I understand the third party and I understand our main characters, but the authorities, it just kind of seems like this vague, well, we're the government, so we're just gonna jump in here because why not? Like, it doesn't feel like they are on the same level or timer or anything like that as the rest of the characters in this movie.
That's fair. Yeah, but as far as other things go, though, I do think the movie looks really good. I think the score is suitably kind of a mix of sort of pulsing kind of thriller music, but also moments of, kind of like a more piano kind of suite and things that kind of bring out the emotional side of things a little bit more. Even a little bit of wonder where it's appropriate. Just a little bit of wonder because the kid is kind of wondrous in some ways. So I think there's some really interesting themes at play in here, which we'll talk about more once we can dive into it. As far as like sticking to spoiler-free stuff just now, we have mentioned a couple of the cast members, but our two leads are Michael Shannon and Joel Edgerton, who are the two guys that have got the boy early on. The boy's name's Alton. He's played by Jaeden Martell, who I think I've seen in stuff with him a bit more grown up. He's got kind of a recognizable...
He was one of the kids in It.
He was in
I
It.
think chapter
that makes
1.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he probably had the cameo one too, but yeah, the chapter 1 was the one with all the kid stuff, so yeah, that makes sense.
Yep. And then he was the little like alt-right kid in Knives Out, the original one.
Ah, yes. I knew his face looked familiar. And of course, the first time I saw this, those things hadn't happened yet, so I wouldn't have recognized them then. So we also have Kirsten Dunst showing up in here in a role. We have Adam Driver. This was right after Force Awakens come out, so this is probably when most people had just realized who he was.
Yeah, so apparently, according to trivia, the first day of shooting on this movie was the day that he found out that he was going to be Kylo Ren. So I'm kind of thinking that Warner Brothers may have sat on this for a little bit just to really be able to cash in on and Adam Driver.
That wouldn't be the most shocking thing in the world, given that it's not some big tentpole blockbuster. They can hold this for 6 extra months or whatever it is, just to like, hey, you know him from Star Wars now. Come and see this. Yeah. Also, Bill Camp's in here in one of the smaller roles. Sam Shepard's in a smaller role. So there's a bunch of recognizable faces, kind of sprinkled throughout. So it definitely feels like a mid 2010s cast, if nothing else.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have no complaints about any of the actors. I don't think. I think the acting in general kind of elevates a fair amount of the material. Like I think of a character like Lucas, which is Joel Edgerton's character, and I look at him and I think to myself, you know, there's not a lot of like backstory given to him. There's a few things that it hints at early on, which it confirms later, but for the most part, like, you have to rely on his performance to kind of get how he's feeling about this and like how he got drawn into this, because he is kind of separate to it, outside of just knowing Michael Shannon's character. So the performances in some of the cases really go a long way to giving me like just making that guy and to an extent Michael Shannon's character as well, but making them feel very fleshed out when the script is quite, you know, holding back and not trying to over explain who they are. So I kind of appreciate that. It's definitely a movie that wants to keep some things mysterious, and that includes even some of the character motivations. So it has this kind of restraint throughout the whole thing, which can be a double-edged sword depending on what's working and what's not working. But I think in this case that wasn't a problem in this movie. If anything, I think it gave you that sense of urgency from them, because they're acting like this is urgent, we have to do this, without it ever having to stop and explain things early on. Like, you don't really get a sense of what they're doing until, you know, a significant chunk into the movie.
Yeah, I also think that it comes down to, as we find out more and more about like what makes him special, like what he is able to do, if you were to go down that more of an explanation path, it does kind of lose its wonder of like, how exactly does this work? How exactly do we do that? The same sort of thing of like, oh, you know, Superman's powers work because the yellow sun or whatever. It's this thing where if you take the time to explain it, you do lose just a little bit of the wonder along the way. It can still be very whimsical, very like wonderful in its own specific way, but I think that keeping that very close to the chest, along with all the other stuff of like plans and what they're doing and all that, makes it so you're still curious about how all of this works, even right up into the third act.
Yeah. There's enough wonder and kind of just sort of once it gets into the more science fiction-y stuff, it starts to feel like it's like that's hope. And this, like, the regular world feels so dark and miserable and tense, and like we're just like barely surviving, that any hint of something else is like a reprieve. And that actually kind of fits into how some characters view the kid as well. The third party that we're kind of alluding to, they like how they respond to him and how they treat him is very much playing into how he makes them feel with his existence and with what he's doing with whatever abilities or natural like occurrences are happening around him. So I do think that when it comes to themes here, in terms of like talking about what the movie's about, I feel like obviously we're talking about simple things like freedom and stuff like that, but I think the idea of like what the characters believe and how like characters will exploit something and like this, in the name of this right thing or that right thing, is definitely something that's brought up throughout the movie. You know, it's just kind of there as a layer the entire time, without it ever being something that comes out in an argument or has characters debating it. You know, it's not a movie that wants to stop and make debates about what's right and wrong. It's just characters who are determined to do what they think is right the entire time, and that clashes with other characters who either think something's right or know what they're doing is wrong, but they're trying to intervene in what the perceived right thing is.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, I think one of the other larger themes here is this idea of, you know, having your child and wanting them to grow up, do their own thing, and like, you know, be their own person, and then also having this parental safety to it, where you don't want them to get hurt or anything like that. You want to keep them safe, and the kind of battle between those two. And I think that's what really works for me from a characterization standpoint, is that it's not just the characters that you would think would be parental are worried about this kid. It's like every character who comes across this kid is like, well, we need him to do his stuff, but also keep him safe. And so they've got this sort of battle going on in between of how they manage to square that and where different characters lie on that spectrum. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's much else to talk about without getting into everything, so we probably have to give the spoiler warning at this point and get into Midnight Special. So if you haven't seen it and you want to go check it out, which I would recommend doing, then this is the point of no return. But spoilers for Midnight Special, you have been warned. All right. So, I guess he's kind of an alien, but he's an alien from an alternate. I mean, dimension doesn't even feel right. It's more like.
Right.
Because when we actually get glimpses of this other world at the end, it's very clear that it exists. Not because I think when he first describes it earlier on, and he says, "Oh, I think I'm from another world that exists on top of our world." I'm like, okay, so it's like an alternate, dimension. It's an alternate reality. That makes sense. Whatever.
Yeah.
But at the end, when you see like the structures come out, and you actually get to see what the other world looks like, I feel like there's a couple of times where you see like some of the structures are literally built on top of the buildings in our world. So it's very clear that they exist on like another frequency or spectrum to everyone else, but they still work on top of what's here and what we've put here on Earth. And that's a very interesting concept.
Yeah, so I mean, that's, without getting too deep into it right away, kind of the kid's whole thing is operating off of this idea of radio waves and like light spectrums and stuff like that. So there is something to be said about that level of these beings, this world is operating on a different frequency, something that's outside of our perceivable range or whatever like that. Yeah, no, I think that the reveal of that in the third act is an interesting way to do it, and it certainly provides for some very strong visuals. But, and I'm not saying this as a negative, but it doesn't really explain much of anything. It just kind of shows it and says, this is what was going on. You're not going to understand it anyway, so we're not going to bother really telling you what it is. And then they just go away.
Yeah, I have no problem with that. I don't want it to be over explained.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like I said, I'm not saying that as a negative. I think it's good that they had some restraint there and kept it close to the chest. But I that's the one bit that I am really happy that they kept tight, is his power set and the stuff that they don't go that deep into explaining how it works. I think when I talk about wanting more stuff explained, it really does come down to the cult, the ranch. I wanted to know more about them and like what their deal was, and they're just immediately gone.
Yeah, for those of you who have not watched the movie and are like, what's this third party? We're talking about where he was taken from. For the last few years, he had been kind of, I wouldn't say imprisoned, although effectively imprisoned, in a cult, which is a ranch of people who basically treat anything he says. So just to sort of go through the sort of the gist of what this kid's sort of like life kind of has been recently. It seems like two key points to make. One, as time went on, as he got older, it became clear that it was dangerous to have him in daylight, right? So something would, things would start breaking, cars would stop working, electrical malfunctions and storms, rumbles, whatever. And it became this thing where we have to only have him be awake at night. He has to be shielded from sunlight, so he sleeps during the day. And obviously, at first, any comparisons to Superman feel like, oh, that's the opposite of Superman because it's more vampire-like. He can't go in the daylight. However, later on when he's sick and they realize, no, he has to absorb the sunlight. That's actually what's going to fix him. I'm like, oh, it is like Superman. It's almost like, oh, his body hadn't absorbed enough yet to really process it and like actually like take it. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. The point I was getting at though is that this is what was happening, is that they were doing all their services at night. And they were sort of operating their entire day structure around when this kid could be awake and be outside and all the rest of it. And the second thing is that occasionally he would start saying things just randomly and it would sound like he's getting messages. Well, they perceive it as from God, where he's saying these random things. He's speaking in different languages. What's actually happening, and it's pretty clear early on what's happening, is that he's just picking up signals like radio waves, satellite signals, which is actually how the government end up getting involved, because a lot of what he's picking up is like super decrypted and like top secret, and they're like, wait, why does this kid in this ranch have like coordinates for like secret stuff we were doing like 6 months ago? This is really unsettling, and we think he's a Russian spy. We're coming after him or something. So
yeah. I really like the way, because that's Adam Driver's character. He works NSA, he does code breaking and stuff like that. And when they get to the cult, he basically sits down. He's not a guy in charge. He's kind of just a lackey underneath a couple guys. But he sits down and he's like, well, these numbers, 38, 57, blah, 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 what do they mean to you? And he's like, oh, that was part of our holy scripture. That was part of a sermon I gave. And he's like, right. That was part of an encrypted government transmission that, because you know about that, you have committed something above treason, and you are going to be locked up forever. So you better start talking, buddy.
Yeah, because we get like a little sense of this ranch before the FBI come in and raids it. And like he's basically given orders to Bill Camp and this other guy, like, hey, you better go find that boy by Friday. Like, we need him back here. This is super important. It feels like the movie makes it very clear early on that this group do not want to lose this boy. Obviously, they're upset that he's gone. They want him back, but they make it very clear that they are concerned that if he's not back here by Friday, they clearly think that like disaster's happening, which probably means losing him forever. So they don't want to lose him, even if that's what the right thing to do is. And that's obviously what the movie's kind of getting at for the rest of it, is that he should go to this location. He should go be with the people he belongs to be with, blah, 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 blah. But they want to keep him. So there's this kind of like exploitation like side of this. And I'm not saying everyone in the cult is exploiting him, but certainly the people in charge of the cult are absolutely exploiting him and using him as like a tool, as a prop to like gain their following and keep control of them.
I mean, I kind of disagree with that reading. I think the people up top, even if you take it as they are going way too far with it, and we'll get to the rest of the plot where you see they are absolutely going way too far with it. The thing that I was getting here is through all of their talks and all of their whatevers, through what his magical hearing is, it's not specifically just radio signals. There is something more buried underneath. And it turns out that they end up getting a date, and that's this Friday, as you were saying, that's coming up.
Yeah.
I think that this is less about the control of the people and more about they honestly believe that like this is the rapture. This is 100% their ability to go into the next world and find salvation, whatever else. And if they don't have the kid there, like they will be left behind. Well, and that gives that level of, oh, we are willing to do anything to make sure that we have that.
Okay, let me rewind a little bit. The point I was getting at is that they're being selfish, right? And I do thoroughly 100% think that that is absolutely what is happening here. One of the things that comes up as well, of course, is that he like his eyes light up. And if you look into his lit up eyes when he's doing that, you see images, presumably of this other world, right? And clearly all these people at the ranch have all had a glimpse of this. They've seen it themselves. And they think this is them being touched by God, that they're seeing something from heaven or whatever it might be. And it feels like they are so determined to not lose that. I still see that in part of like the leaders of the cult wanting to keep control. But I do think the entire cult is so touched by what they see when they look into this boy's eyes when they're lit up. Because we see that example, the first person they go to for help is this guy who used to be in the cult, and he's helping them well enough, but during the night, he catches him like staring into the boy's eyes because he wants to see these images again, because they fill him with like hope and so much and all that. And it feels like a lot of this movie is really wrestling with this idea of, okay, these images that we're getting from the boy are genuinely filling people with like good feelings and vibes, but it's also acting like a drug to the people who have looked into it. And they're trying to, like, instead of trying to make their world better, their lives better, to like achieve the same kind of ideas that are in those visuals, they're instead just wanting another hit off the kid because they're seeing something better that they feel like they can't have. Right? This is one of the themes that I think is kind of in there. So all this stuff's super interesting to me, which is why I think there's a lot of meat on the movie's bones. Even if you do think that from a structural perspective, it's kind of following some movies from the 80s about the whole road trip to get to the destination and, you know, all that side of it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I like it. Again, this is something that I wanted it to be more expanded on. And what ends up happening through the plot of the movie is that we get this intro, we get like the FBI or NSA or whatever is doing their investigation into this ranch. This is where we get most of this info dropped to us. But then we're just kind of narrowed down to two of the cult characters who are going out to collect the boy again, using any means necessary. Won't spoil quite yet how exactly we get there, but basically they get written out. Like the plot happens, they finish up, and then we move into the third act without them. And from that point on, there's nothing left of the cult. There's no other sign of them coming into this. And I don't feel like, for how interesting they were with all of these themes going in of like, how far is it okay to go if it means your eternal soul or like the rapture or anything like that, for them to just get left out and replaced with the government who basically doesn't believe any of this, but just sees the kid as dangerous and therefore needing to be contained. Like it has nothing to do with them even thinking that there is this larger world at large. It's just kind of, okay, he has powers. That's not going to be up for debate. We want to control him because of that. And that's far more boring for me than the cult idea.
Yeah, I just don't have that much of a negative feeling about it. Like, I would like there to see some reactions from the leader of the cult, at least, in the back chunk of the movie. Like, maybe some of them might have kept following, in cars or whatever, and being close enough. Because we see at the end, the radius of which people can see this other world is quite big. It's like the entire southeast of the country, basically. It's this big, huge bubble that extends like all the way out to the tip of Florida and then all the way up to whatever state, somewhere in the middle.
It's centered on Tallahassee, I believe they showed it exactly, which is up in the panhandle of Florida. And then it expands to almost cover all of Florida. So it gives you that general range there. Yeah.
But in both directions, though. So it's going like however far inland as well.
Right.
Like I think, I would have liked a little bit more follow-up from them. And I do agree that it's a shame that there's like no threads from that cult in the last act of the movie. I do think that like would have been an asset, and it would have like them seeing this other world, and even if they never say anything about it, just seeing the look in their faces, and like maybe we could try and interpret from the performances, like, is this what they thought it was? Are they like relieved to see it? Are they sad because this is like almost confirming it's not what they thought it was? Or like how are they processing it? Like there's a lot of things in there you could probably do with that.
I think personally, I would have liked to see them like see it, and then as it's fleeting away, them being all upset about it because they wanted it to be a permanent thing. They thought they were being raptured up or whatever.
Yeah, I just don't have this, I don't know, like big disappointment that it's like it's not there in the third act. It's because for me, it's more about the fact that the parents are having to give up their kid. Right, it's not really about the obstacles as much as it is in the end about them accepting that they have to let him go, which is another kind of theme of the movie, which does bring into this other like element of it from like a mythology point of view. Is this kid didn't come from the other world, right? It's not like he accidentally crash landed through frequencies into like regular Earth. He does have parents, like Michael Shannon and Kirsten Dunst are his parents. Like she gave birth to him, and he's just connected to these other like. Is this like an evolution thing where eventually more and more people like will be born and with on this, pardon the word I'm going to use here, on this spectrum to use a word that has a lot of weight from another reason, but is that something that's going to happen more and more? Is it because, I don't know, like he was born or conceived in the right time and place? Because I assume that this location that they have to go to is the location because either it's where the veil is thinnest between the two worlds, or maybe it's because of whatever building they've got in their world there is like a gateway that they can kind of open up on a special time or something. But
right. I mean, if we're talking about the location and like getting there on time and stuff, I don't have anything for that. But I think the obvious parallel through everything that's being said here is the Christ metaphor, where he is human, but also God. He was born to human parents, but he also has this spark of divinity inside of him. So I think that this is very obviously that sort of idea of why he would be boosted as a religious figure. He has these extra powers. He was born to just a normal, seemingly everyday couple. And the idea that there would be more of them, I mean, you can stretch that, but I think the movie presents it much more in this. He was chosen specifically by these people for some larger purpose. What that would be, maybe just making people aware of this other world is all that he was really meant to do. But that's, I don't think the evolutionary idea of it really comes into play or anything like that.
I was just speculating there. I wasn't saying that was something the movie hinted at. I was just throwing that out. Why do you think he was chosen?
Right.
Why do you think that?
I mean, why was Jesus chosen? Like in terms of the mythology, it's basically just okay. One random person was chosen or whatever like that, and they just happen to have these powers. I think it's more about
if you're talking
about the goal.
Hold on a second, though. Jesus wasn't chosen.
What do you mean?
Well, okay. Again, if you're taking this all as actual fact
a metaphor
here,
for Christ,
right? Jesus was born. It was Mary that was chosen.
Right, okay, so if you want to put it back a generation, then yes, Mary, fine. This group, these parents or whatever like that were chosen. I I don't have an answer for you. The movie's not interested in giving an answer, but I think, to have it happen to this just random ass couple is kind of this sort of other implication, as we said, where they have nothing special about them. That's kind of still paralleling the Jesus metaphor, where it's this thing of there's nothing special about Mary and Joseph.
I'm not saying it doesn't parallel that. I'm not disagreeing with any of that. I think there's clearly some parallels there. The fact that a cult takes them in and like keeps them for themselves instead of letting them, do whatever, wander the. I mean, he's a bit young for that still, I guess, but like, the sort of the greed of that, I think is part of it. But I'm just saying that this idea that these other beings chose to have someone here, I don't necessarily buy that this was an intentional decision at all. I'm not saying it definitely isn't, but I don't see why you're jumping to that in any way, shape, or form. That feels like an assumption on your part.
Well, no, the reason that I think that it's intentional is because they give him a specific date and a specific location. Like they must at least be aware of him out there and say, hey, be at this place at this time and we will welcome you in.
Aware, yes, but like I took that more as they can clearly communicate signals to him because they now know he exists because they're watching. I mean, the kid even says that at one point, and they've been watching, for years at this point, for a long time. So I just took that as, he's like us, he should be here instead of there. So we're going to send him like the means to get here.
Yeah, and I mean, that's viable. I'm not arguing. The movie, like I said, is not interested in answering that question. I read it, however, as these creatures, whatever these beings are in this other frequency spectrum, whatever, they seem to be far more in control of things. They seem to be far more technologically advanced, far more intelligent. They seem to have a better grasp on things. So it just seems more reasonable in my mind that they are in control of this situation as well. And they were able to place this and like have it be their idea rather than this just being some random chance thing. That's just what makes sense to me. But I don't think that it harms the reading either way to have it in either direction.
I mean, I don't think it necessarily does make more sense to me, but I certainly don't think it's more interesting to me. Like, I think the idea that this just happened is like happenstance for whoever dominoes fell that allowed it to happen. And he's like it makes it more of a genuine miracle to keep going with those ideas and that terminology. But I think it's more interesting to me about reacting to him existing and how the people of our world react to him existing versus how the people of this other world who see that he's now exists and how they react. Like their instinct seemingly is to, hey, get to this location so you can come and be safe here. Like, I think that's more interesting to me than, we planted this chosen one. Because for what purpose? If they intentionally chose to do this, to send like a being to Earth only to try and have to get him back years later, 8 years later when he's still a child, like it's not like he's achieved anything in that time. He's not done anything. So that makes sense to me.
Again, I think the goal was to make people aware of this other world. You have that giant bubble expanding. It shows all these buildings and whatnot. I think that was kind of you are the bridge between the worlds now. Go ahead, show us off and do whatever. And then they accept them into their essentially paradise afterwards. Again, that's what I'm reading from it. And I'm kind of just taking this Christ metaphor to its logical conclusion that where you're saying it's random, I think it was guided because of the Christ metaphor. That's like how that began at the beginning and how I think it would move its way through. Obviously, it's not, rapturing everybody else up or whatever, but it's kind of wasn't that in the Christ metaphor either. He died to quote unquote forgive our sins. I think that this is that same sort of thing where we're showing off all of this world that is above these people as sort of a reminder for, hey, stop being so selfish, stop being so self-contained. There is something bigger than yourself here. And that's where everyone's looking on it with awe. And they're like so awestruck by all these buildings that they didn't even know were above them.
I think the difference here is that I see the Christ parallels to be, these characters reacting to this because that's exactly what they relate it to, because they can't process who this kid is other than he's some biblical figure. And then everything being a knock-on effect from how they decide to react to that. And obviously there's some themes here and whatnot, but at no point does that mean to me that to have those parallels, you have to actually have it be this chosen thing where there is effectively a godlike figure who's made this choice. Like my mind just doesn't go there inherently, but because to me it's more interesting if it's like, no, this is a fault of the people and how they're interpreting it, rather than like this just being taken for granted that no, it's exactly a Christ thing because this is a paradise and he's going to a paradise. Because I don't look at this other world and necessarily think it's better. Like I don't necessarily have that assumption. I mean, obviously it looks kind of impressive and all the rest of it, but I'm sure they have their own problems. I'm sure this is their own thing. I take this as, someone's where they're not supposed to be and they're different from everyone else, and they're trying to get back to this other place where that will they will be accepted, they will fit in, and he can be himself there, kind of thing.
Okay. I mean, I absolutely got the feeling that they were more advanced just because of the way their structures looked and all that. It didn't have as much support or anything like that.
I never said they weren't more advanced. I never said that.
You just said better. Okay, fair enough.
Well, because you said they're a paradise. Like you kept hammering home, they're a paradise, they're a heaven, they're, everyone's looking in awe because they're the better thing above us, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm not necessarily, I think it looks impressive, don't get me wrong, and I'm saying that I get why it would look that way, but I don't necessarily take for granted that they don't have their own problems. I mean, maybe they are much better than us. That's entirely possible. It wouldn't be hard, let's be honest. But
that's reasonable. That's fair. I think I was getting Paradise through the visual language of it, where it was like there was a glow to it. Everything was like perfectly sun shining seemingly through every surface. Like it was very, especially compared to all the previous stuff we saw, it was very lit up and very bright and shiny. And that's kind of the sort of tone that you get from those sort of Paradise ideas, is everything's just bright and shiny and there's light emanating from every object. But again, the movie may have just used that as a shorthand and it may not actually be a paradise. It doesn't matter to the movie. It's not interested in that. It is specifically how we are reading it and how that impacts that specific aspect of it. So I'm not arguing that yours is not a valid interpretation. I'm just saying how I got to my conclusions here.
Oh, I'm not saying you can't feel differently. I'm just like, you said it so like confident, like this is what it is when you said it, that I'm like, no, I'm pulling you up on that. Because I don't read it exactly that way.
That's just because I ooze confidence, Pete. You have to come onto the internet sure in your opinions. Otherwise, dear Lord, they'll eat you alive.
Also, like, I have to admit, the whole Christ allegory thing does at a certain point get boring to me, where I'm like talking through about it through that lens. Like, I like analyzing the characters, like going down that rabbit hole and like seeing how that type of group reacts to this character and like how they interpret it. But having it just for granted that, just write it off as, it's all just a Christ allegory, there's no reason to go any deeper than that. To me, that's boring, and it's ignoring all the more interesting aspects of what it is. So I think it's a disservice to just sort of cut it off there and just sort of like stop it there.
No, I everything that I'm throwing out here in terms of that, this movie strays away from. Like, again, we have the character of Lucas. There is no parallel to Lucas in a Christ allegory. Like, he's just the dude that's like ride or die with Roy here, and he's his own character. I like him there. Obviously, the government wasn't, late stage Jesus was chasing after Jesus, but like not in this way, not in this, like we were trying to control him and like make him do work for us. Like that's an entirely different thing. It's not a one-to-one by any means, and I don't think the movie should be viewed entirely myopically through that lens, but I just think that the overarching beats of it do map pretty cleanly onto that, but there is so much ability to move within that throughout that this movie does make it its own thing.
Yeah, for me it's a lot more about how he's able to inspire people to want to help him even when most people want to come after him. Right, he's able to sort of like reach out and kind of like at a certain point, Lucas is a devout believer, and I'm using that word which makes it sound biblical, but like he believes in helping him. He believes that this kid needs to be helped, and it feels like a genuine act of like kindness at a certain point that he's willing to do that. Same, of course, when he eventually has Adam Driver kind of flip and want to help him. Because he's like, hey, this guy will actually, if I show this guy like where I'm trying to go, he will understand and want to help me get there. Because I think the, because this whole idea of going home, as much as, like I almost like, wish she hadn't compared it to E.T. During the start of the review, because it made it sound a bit too much like it's an alien trying to go home, which is kind of what it is.
My comparison points for E.T. were far more the middle section with like the powers being shown off and that sort of aspect of it. I felt like, you know, the sort of, we even see in E.T., like he can manipulate the TV waves and stuff like that. He's very tied into the way that media is absorbed, and he's able to manipulate like what, I'm blanking on the kid from E.T.'s name, but the kid,
Elliot.
what he does in school from, Elliot, that's it, from a distance. So I was more so getting it there. And then, yeah, the idea of an alien going home, it's there in the broadest strokes, but it's like you said, it's very different in the way that it is accomplishing it, to the point where it's essentially a different task altogether.
Yeah, I think I wasn't getting ET from all the like the powers. To me, it felt a lot more like even from the start, the way like the sound effects would rumble, everything told me it was about like the spectrum of light, electricity, radio waves, all that kind of stuff. And it always felt like it always operated in that kind of rule set. You know, it wasn't like suddenly, oh, we can heal wounds, right? Like E.T. could. Like, it never took a pivot where he has a completely different power that has nothing to do with anything we've seen up until this point. And they all feel like they're on the same kind of, they're on the same kind of wavelength. Again, to use more words that tie into signals and whatnot. So I know. I feel like we've been debating so long about some interpretations here that I don't really want to go through it scene for scene. I think some of the key things that we probably should talk about is maybe kind of the progression of some of the main characters here. Because one of the big examples early on, after the opening, where it's kind of cool that they, to try and stay out of sight, they go to like a back road, turn all the lights off, and Edgerton just pulls out night vision goggles and like drives with night vision goggles so they can just drive in the complete darkness.
Yeah, it's specifically after an Amber Alert goes out and they have the make and model of the car. So they're just basically trying to hide the car from anybody who's passing by. No, I think that's very well done. But then, of course, that immediately leads into the problem of they are not tangentially involved in a car crash, which then involves a cop to see them. And that just leads to its own entire moral quandary.
Well, that scene, I think, is very good because it sets up kind of like some of these characters right at the get-go, because they turn the lights on, there's a car just sitting there, and it's a car that's already crashed, right? But it's like sitting across the road, so it's like, oh shit, we have to swerve. And they pull over, and immediately Edgerton gets out and runs over to the car and tries to like check on this woman in the driver's seat, and he clearly wants to help, and he's doing his best. And down the road, a cop car starts pulling up, and he kind of flags the car to be like, hey, I'm going to make sure this cop gets to her, because while the cops are taking care of her, we'll just drive off slowly, no big deal, we'll get away. But obviously the cop, as he's like, gets out, he talks to him for a little bit, he notices the car he came from and starts to like, call it in. So Edgerton pulls out a gun, but then so does, what's his face, Shannon from the car, he comes out with a shotgun. And Edgerton's like, hey, no, let me handle this. And he's like, hey, just put the radio down, go back. And Shannon keeps escalating it, so Edgerton has to make the choice to fire first, and he fires in a place where if somebody's wearing a vest, he'll be okay. But it really feels like, okay, you're setting up that these characters like aren't monsters because they wanted to help this woman who was in a car accident, especially Edgerton, who got out to go and check on her. And Shannon never like stopped him, he never questioned it or said don't do that. He was letting that go down. So it's like, okay, they're not monsters, they care about this innocent person who's in an accident. But then as soon as like it became about, oh, we might get stopped on this mission, you see how just like fiercely Shannon is like ready to just start blasting with that shotgun. And Edgerton has to be kind of this middle ground who tries to de-escalate it. And then on top of that, it also shows that he clearly has a history in law enforcement, because he goes over to the radio and calls in what's just happened with all the terminology. And you're like, oh, that just gave us some good character background on him in a very natural way. And then they got on their way. So I thought it was a really good scene at just accomplishing a lot of the character dynamics early on.
Oh, yeah. No, I think the best, I mean, don't get me wrong, Edgerton, it does a great job of showing all of the different steps of like, he's not willing to go as far as Shannon in these aspects. He's got some law enforcement history. But I think what it really does to benefit for here is Shannon, because up until this point, the movie has not told us like what the relation here is. He seems to be acting kindly towards the kid, but all we've gotten in official, like what the movie has told us, is there's an Amber Alert out and this guy has the kid and they have his face plastered all over the news. So we're not sure whether or not to trust him as being a good guy yet. But this is the scene where you see how fiercely protective of the kid he is, of how far he's like, just shoot this guy and let's go. And you get the point of his character is he's willing to discard all of his morals, everything about himself, just to get this kid to whatever the location is, wherever it is they're going. So I think it does a great job with him as well.
Yeah, I would also say that there is hints before this scene, though. Like, even just like the body language as he's telling the kid, hey, it's time to go, and they get out of the motel room. Like, the way he picks him up, the way he talks to him. Like, none of it feels like, oh, this is a kidnapper who's, like, got a victim. None of it feels like that. Right. And then, obviously, you say this scene kind of, like, you know, pays it off. You finally hear that this is his father, and that, you know, we kind of go from there. But and on this scene as well, you know, when they get to the house where they hide out at the guy's place for a little bit, Edgerton turns around and says, hey, that didn't have to play out like that. I could have de-escalated that in a different way. Like, I'm in this till the end, but do not do that again. So there is like a little bit of interesting conflict there, but they never do it in a way where it's like Shannon starts to doubt if he is like committed to it. It's just kind of like, no. Like, he has some moral lines that he's not going to cross. It would maybe one of the things that would have been interesting is to hear if the kid's got an opinion on how some of this stuff played out, and maybe he was more of an influence maybe on his father at some point about what the right or wrong thing to do is in a certain situation.
Yeah, I mean, again, it plays into that idea of a parent's idea to protect the kid at all costs. Like, you want to defend your child from anything that hurts them out in the world. But then in this specific instance, especially, you know this kid is destined for greater things, and it's kind of balancing, where is that line? How do you square the idea of protecting them from harm, but then getting them to do this thing that may very well kill them? And something that we kind of dipped on a little bit there is as we're progressing through this opening acts, the kid is sick and he just keeps getting sicker. And when we get introduced to Kirsten Dunst, when we get Joel Edgerton's character commenting on it, all of them are like, no, we need to get some help. Like, this kid needs to go to a hospital. And it's Michael Shannon who's the one who's basically like, no, he's going to survive. He's going to be fine. He has to get to this location. We're not risking that. So it kind of feels like that determined safety of trying to keep the kid safe is not for the sake of the kid, but more for the mission at that point.
Well, no, it made me think in a weird way, Jonathan Kent, and the fear of like, what will they do to my boy if they get their hands on him in the hospital and they like get his blood work and, you know, whatever else, you know, like, because that's the thing, like, if anything, I was surprised that at no point during the debate of like, we need to take him to the hospital, did Shannon ever say, what are they going to do for him? He's not a regular human. Like, they're not going to know what this is. The sickness stuff doesn't really come in though until after the satellite incident, and that's when it really starts to like get to the point where he looks a bit sicker, he starts coughing a bit more and all that. Before we get to that, there is like when they leave this guy's place and they obviously like had to hit him because he was doing the whole like I need to see through this boy's eyes again bit, but he was during the day and it was making the house rumble and like part of the wall was ripping apart, all the rest of it. So you get this sense of power. It's the biggest example of like, oh, what this kid might be capable of up until that point. The reason why I'm mentioning this, though, is there is a bit at the end where you think Shannon might have killed this guy because this guy knows where they were going, and it's left in a very ambiguous, like, you know, he probably killed him after the camera cut, and it's not until later we find out that he didn't.
That's the one thing I think I would have preferred a little bit more of an explanation on. We do get a little bit of it, but it's said during this bit that the cult doesn't know where they're going. They're like, for some reason, this little tiny group we're dealing with knows the location. They've managed to decrypt it, but the cult has no idea. And that's the part that kind of just, I needed a little bit more of an explanation on, like, how did we get this location? Why is it only this small group that gets it? And then double down later on in the movie, Adam Driver figures it out. And I still feel like I don't understand how we got it all figured out. Like, he shows circling some numbers and it's just like, there, I've got the location. It's like, how? What led you to this? I'm so confused.
I just don't think this matters. I mean, I think the vibe you get from it to me is that all of these numbers he was spouting was the kid when he was like interpreting these signals. He was trying, as Driver puts it later, he was just trying to figure out a language to say where he needs to go, and all he was hearing was coordinates. And they're like mixed up in all those things he was saying. There was recurring numbers or something that like led to like what the final like coordinates were, and basically, whether it was Shannon or maybe the guy that they went to for help, whoever it was, had figured this out from within the cult, but the cult itself did not know this. And partly maybe because they weren't looking for it, because they were just like, oh, these are the numbers of the gospel, blah, 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 blah. Like, you know, let's worship these numbers. They mean something to us.
This is the date. It's going to be a worldwide thing. Like, Rapture's going to hit all at once.
So, and the idea is that Adam Driver's just such a good, like, data analyst and, like, you know, code cracker or whatever that he's able to figure out as well. So I never had too much of a question about that. It was because I think it was made clear when they get to the house with this guy, and the guy puts out the map and sort of shows in the map where this location leads to. One of them says, "Hey, like, did the cult figure this out?" And he says, "No, they only have the date," or something like that. Like, there's a line specifically saying, "No, they've not figured this out." So, yeah, I was fine with that. I think once you get like past this section though, the first big like wow moment is they've not gotten to Kirsten Dunst yet. They stop at a petrol station for some fuel, for some supplies, and like Shannon goes to make a phone call at the payphone. Edgerton goes out of the store because again, Shannon's fault was all over the news as a kidnapper, so he's trying to stay out of sight. And the kid starts looking up at like the sky, and he sees like a blink of light, and he sort of like wanders out a bit. He gets out of the van and he's looking up at it because they've taken this guy's van, so they've switched cars, so they're not in the same car that everyone's looking for. And this woman comes up to talk to him, and immediately when Shannon sees this, he comes running out and tries to like get her to go away as quickly as humanly possible. And it's all very weird and awkward. He grabs the kid and he's like, "Oh, like, you know, I told you not to leave the van. What did you do? What did you do?" And the kid, who's barely said anything up until this point, says, "I'm sorry." And he's like, "Oh, you know what? I'm getting too angry. It's my fault. I shouldn't have left you." And he's like, "No, I'm sorry." Which made me laugh a little bit because that's usually a fart joke.
Yeah. I was gonna say it's just the Shaun of the Dead joke.
Yeah. But then they look up and we see debris, like bright flashing lights of debris falling out of the sky, and it starts falling around them, like crushing part of the building. Big visual effects sequence. I think in the moment when I first saw it, I assumed this was a plane, and I was like, God, why did he do that? That's quite dark. Later on, though, we find out that it's a satellite that he brought down.
Yeah, I think for me, I kind of thought it was just like meteors or something like that. I thought we were expanding the power slightly more, but then very quickly, like you said, a later scene says, what is it, satellites? Because they make it very clear it's not all from a single point. They make it very clear, like, this is kind of a scattered debris is all coming down here. So it works. It's a very solid sequence. I think, again, this goes to the idea of it feels like an indie film so much of the time. And then every once in a while, it'll pull this kind of stunt out where you see the budget that was given to it by the studio and they make it work.
Yeah, no, I mean, the satellite thing makes complete sense when they say it because... I felt it was something he'd broken up. I didn't think it was meteors because the way the kid says sorry to me said, no, this was something he's done. Like, he's broken something and it's fallen to Earth. When you find out it's a satellite, though, and they explain that it's a satellite that's basically its only purpose is to pay attention to radiation and look for nuclear events of any kind. And the idea that this kid was being detected by it because whatever he's emitting was showing up as like some sort of nuclear thing. Although they point out in this scene that there's no radiation at the scene afterwards. So whatever it is, while it's showing up as that, it's not leaving anything dangerous in like the aftermath or anything. But the kid could basically sense that this thing was detecting him. That through the signals, whatever, he could tell that this satellite was watching him and paying attention to him. And that's what's led to him bringing it down. Now, whether or not he intentionally... I mean, he did kind of intentionally do it, but whether or not he meant it to be as destructive as it was, I think is maybe open for debate. But
yeah,
he wanted it to stop.
Yeah, it seemed much more to me like, like he was just like, all right, I'm just going to turn you off. But then in doing so, he introduced something to throw it out of orbit. The fact that it was crashing down directly onto like, not even like the square mile, like it was just this gas station makes me think there might have been something to do with like magnetic pull or something like that, but that's not covered in the movie.
Yeah, I think you could probably just sort of headcanon that and say, yeah, it's attracted to him specifically, like, you know, give or take. Because they even show in the thermal photograph from the satellite, the last thing it saw, the cloud of like energy it sees isn't like the size of a boy. It's like, you know, it's covering like the whole like square half mile or something like that. So it kind of, yeah, it kind of makes some sense. Yeah, so that's kind of a big thing. Then they go to Kirsten Dunst, who turns out to be the mother. And this is where you get into this idea of like her actually being a lot more loving than Shannon, and clearly like loving how grown up he is and hugging him and holding him close, not taking her eyes off, and the question of like giving him up depending on how this all works out. That really came into the movie with her, I think, because before this, like, Shannon was so dead set in just achieving the mission for him. You know, he believed that was the right thing to do, but this was like her. She actually brings in the more human side of the parental relationship.
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, I'm glad they didn't cover it because it just is more interesting in thinking about it. But I do kind of want to know the backstory between these two and the cult. Like, because obviously, at some extent, like, Shannon must have been involved in the cult in at least some aspects. But Kirsten Dunst is here in a totally separate house, seemingly far away from everything else. So did she leave the cult? Is this something where she's just living separately from them? I'm just curious as to what the backstory here was.
There are some hints. Edgerton says that he was really close with Shannon. They were best friends basically before the cult happened. And it sounds like Shannon went with his parents. The parents moved him to the cult, which makes me think that they were at most teenagers when this happened, when he left, because he went with his parents. So it sounds like, you know, him and Dunst like became a couple in the ranch, in the cult, and, you know, over the time of their kid growing up. I think she has a line at one point saying that for the last 2 years specifically, the leader of the cult like took over his father and like took the son away from them, and that's probably what started this build up to him feeling like, I need to like get my son out of here. Like, this cult's actually a cult. Oh no, I've realized suddenly that I'm in a cult. And I have been for most of my life.
Well, see, but then that raises the question of what was the cult about before the kid? Like, the implication for me is this cult kind of sprung up around this kid. But if they
that's definitely not true based on that. Yeah. The line about when Shannon's family joined the cult definitely makes that not true.
Right. But was it just like a stereotypical, like, you know, end times are coming, don't worry about it, and then all of a sudden this kid shows up being like, see, look, this kid is proof.
They've got their own farm. I do imagine that when this kid started like saying things and they started paying attention to it, that significantly pivoted what this cult's like, you know, manifesto was.
Yeah. Turns out right up until then they were just like straight up like Doomsday Cthulhu stuff, and they're like, whoa, hold on. Let's put a pause on all that. We're just going to do what the kid says.
Having said that, it makes complete sense to me that they start hearing this kid say stuff, and the leader of the cult just makes it fit whatever, like, you know, agenda he's got. Like, because that's what a lot of like religious kind of like cult leaders do, right? Is they take, you know, an eclipse and say, the eclipse clearly means this and proves what I've been saying all along. You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I do question / appreciate that there must be some level of filtering going on, because we show an earlier scene as I think they're leaving the gas station. It might even be before that, where all of a sudden the kid just starts quote unquote speaking in tongues. Turns out it's Spanish, but not only is it Spanish, it's like some radio host on a publicly accessible channel, and they hear it on the radio tuner. And I'm like, so how much of this guy's sermons are just ads for car insurance that have been filtered through Spanish or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, clearly Shannon's figured out that it's just signals that are coming in. Maybe the idea is that if they can't like find out where it came from, it must be from another worldly source. It must be from the Almighty. But if they can turn on the radio and hear it. But part of me was thinking, are they like Mormons? Is there no technology around, so they think all of this is like mysterious messages?
To be clear, Mormons have technology. You're thinking of the Amish.
Oh, Amish, sorry, yes. Sorry. Yes. Mormons are the ones with the weird underwear, apparently. So
Mormons are the ones who believe Jesus came to America and did a bunch of stuff.
Yes, the quirky regional variant, to quote another movie that I saw recently.
Yep.
Watch Heretic if you haven't, people. That's all I'll say. So
right.
yes, you're right. I was thinking of the Amish. Quite right. That was a good correction. So yeah, and it's like, okay, he's getting sicker, he's coughing, he's whatever. They're having this debate, and when they're driving the next day, and Kirsten Dunst comes with them, she's like, there's no like question in her mind. She's going with them to their final destination. He starts really like getting sick and freaking out and coughing, and blood's coming out of his nose or whatever. And he's like, it's like he needs to throw up, but nothing's coming out. And they stop the car, and this is where the debate really gets to the point where Shannon actually like pushes down Edgerton when Edgerton's like adamant and they have to go to the hospital. And the kid ultimately kind of like is the one who says, like, you two like drive, like mom go with whatever, Lucas, that's his name, Edgerton's character. You go with Lucas, dad, we need to go into the forest this way. And because like they trust him so much, like Shannon's so like devout in believing what his son needs, that he knows what he needs, that he's like, okay, that's what we're doing then, right, off you go, we'll meet you at the next motel or whatever. And like he takes him into the forest, and this is like kind of the middle leash of the movie, and it's the big moment where they go into like a sort of cave type area. It's like, hey, we can hide from the sun here. And that's when the kid says, no, dad, I need to go out in the sunlight, I need to like be out there in the open and like soak it in. And it's this idea that it's going to be kind of disastrous in like a radius, so that's why it's good that they're in like the middle of a forest, so there's nothing really around to like hurt, other than maybe a couple of unfortunate animals that stumble into the area. But it's this idea that he has to like get over the hump, he has to like fight through the initial wave of like energy that's going to hit with this, but then once he does, he'll be better and he'll come out the other side being able to like walk in the sunlight without any, not that he explains all this, we only see this after the fact. The dad just has to sort of take it on faith that this is good for him.
So two things just to pin onto that.
Yes.
One is while he's coughing and all that, we do like his powers activate as well. So like, there's blinding lights in the car, and they're just all trying to react as best they can. You made the point of saying over the hump, and that seems to be right. That seems to be how it is. But this is one of those things where I want to just the smallest bit of explanation from the kid. It didn't even have to make sense. I don't need it to be something where they go like real deep into science, but I just kind of wanted to think of, if he's always been spending his days indoors and he doesn't get that much sunlight, then why is this an issue now? Why is it that him like, traveling cross country, was it the satellite thing? Was that just too strenuous and like he's really draining his battery? There was something missing there where I wasn't quite understanding why all of a sudden right now this is making him sick and not any of the years beforehand where he's been living at night.
Probably just because the things that are happening now are bigger and bolder. But I also think it might be like a time thing, where because as they started to like experience weird anomalies and malfunctions as he was growing older, I mean, we don't know what ages he was, but let's say around 3 he started like having these weird things around him, and then by the time he got to like 5, that's when they made the choice, no, this is getting too much, we're going to like isolate him from daylight. I have to assume that if they'd let him just be in the daylight as he was growing up, his body would have like continuously adapted to it and he'd be able to control what was happening around him. But because they've shut him off, it's cut him off from the source of sunlight, which seems to be something that he needs for a start. So maybe just like having like, 3-4 years or however long it's been without it is probably, starting to take its toll, especially since he's expending this amounts of energy. I think there's enough there for you to piece some of this together, but without like a concrete, this is definitely how it worked, which I'm okay with. It doesn't bother me, but like, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it's just... I'm okay with explaining that he's getting sicker. I'm okay with saying that he's better. It's just that transition in the middle there that I was like, why now? That's the biggest thing. Because even between the beginning of this movie to the point where says he needs to go outside, like he looks far more visibly ill. If it was a thing where he was always sickly, I think I would have accepted it a lot easier.
I mean, I think it's right after the satellite bit, so I think the movie is telling you that was a turning point. Like he is much worse because of that.
Yeah, probably is.
So... Right. Yeah, I mean, like, so they go back to the motel where the others are, and like they're like shocked to see them in the daylight, and all of a sudden the kid's talking a bit more. He's a bit more confident. He seems to understand now about the other world. Like he now understands that better than he did before. So
it's also worth noting that as we get in the third act, that big dome, we see that dome is over top of Michael Shannon here, as he goes out in the sunlight for the first time. So
Yeah.
we aren't shown what's inside the dome, but Shannon's just like, no, I saw it, man. It's crazy.
He saw it for a few seconds, he says, and then it disappeared. But he saw like where the kid wants to go. Which I did like that. The visual of him running out in the daylight and like holding him as like this is going to happen, even though it might like kill him because the amount of energy that might come off the kid is going to be a problem. But it doesn't. You know, he gets to kind of witness some of this, and like he believes more than ever. Like I need to like take him there. So that gets to the whole thing. I will say probably one of the things I will critique is when they're leaving the motel, it has they're about to be attacked out of nowhere, like energy written all over it, because it's kind of the way that Joel Edgerton's doing some small talk with the kid and they're kind of bonding as he walks out the front door, and I'm like, and 3, 2, 1, bang, here's the two guys from the cult coming. Because we've not really mentioned it, but they've been kind of like on their trail throughout the movie, you know, questioning Kirsten Dunst's mother, then finding the guy from earlier who helped them out for a little bit. They've caught up with them, they're here. They're blasting shotguns, and they do successfully take the kid. Edgerton gets shot, but he's wearing a vest, and the movie isn't trying to trick you with that. The movie went out of its way to show you that he was putting on a vest, like in the earlier scene, so you know that he's probably okay. Yeah, but you know it plays out that way.
Yeah. And again, I love this scene. I think they've done a good job of setting these two up as very villainous characters, because you get the implication they did do something horrific to Kirsten Dunst's mom. They did do something horrific to that guy that helped out the guys before and that Michael Shannon let live. You get these implications that they are the absolute no-nonsense sort of villains, and because they're willing to just open up with a buckshot into Joel Edgerton's character, I think that it does a good job of like, okay, they now have the kid. This is a big threat. This could lead directly into the third act without any sort of branching in between. And then they just immediately get caught by the government. And, like, that's it. Cult story done.
Hold on, though. Well, I agree that I would like more cult involvement in the third act. I actually think the way they do this next sequence is fantastic. I like... we don't see it. Yes. Right? Because what happens is the main characters, like, you know, Kirsten Dunst is able to get out and, like, untie them or uncut their ties loose. And they grab their stuff, they get into the car, and they try and give chase. They're desperate to go find them. This is the first time they've been separated from the kid the whole movie. So there's traffic, though. So it's like, okay, shit, we have to drive around that. So he basically goes off-road and like drives along the traffic. But then there's like a military checkpoint, and it's like, shit, they won't let us, so we have to get back in the queue. And they have to go through this slow traffic, and as they're doing it, you see in the distance a helicopter come in and land like behind the trees, and then you see it take off. And then eventually when they go past it in the truck, you just see like the truck that the two guys that kidnapped him with bullet wounds or blood all over the seat, some, you know, bullet holes in the window. And it's like, oh shit, that all happened off camera. Like the military or whoever came in and took care of these guys, and now they've got the kid. Like the authorities in some capacity have the kid. I love how this scene plays out. Well, I completely get and agree that I would love some cult representation and their reaction in the third act. I actually think this sequence, by not showing you any of this, is great restraint.
No, absolutely. I think it was shot well. I think the driving up, you get this tension as well, because obviously there's also the idea of Shannon's been all over the news. Like the military would clearly want to flag him down. The fact that he doesn't get caught is just a miracle within its own right. But I love the tension of this as we slowly creep around, and the idea that they can't stop either. Like this is a military procession more or less, so they have to keep on driving by, and you just see Kirsten Dunst in the background just start like crying openly as we get this implication of, okay, well, the kid's gone. Like we can't even chase him down now. Yeah, it's the performances again really selling the moment as the moment the characters all realize what's happened. And after this, Shannon's like, we've lost him. We're never going to get him back. That's it. It's done. And they feel like to the point where he almost like walks out in front of a truck, and you think, is he actually just thinking about ending it? Because it feels like he might be. Where it gets a little bit more generic, and I do think the momentum of the movie does feel a bit weird, is, you know, when we see the kid actually in like captivity. I mean, that's a weird word to use here. He's just in like an interrogation room. But you know, he's questioned by like this like counselor, all these military and like officials are behind her. But then the kid, obviously picking up the signals from various things, is like, no, I want to talk to Adam Driver and only him. So everyone else gets out, and he has a one-on-one. Like,
obviously we've set up Adam Driver as a character that we've been seeing throughout the movie, so he's a bit more sympathetic. He doesn't just feel like a faceless military dude or anything like that. But it does feel a little bit simple that he just like comes in, the kid tells him and like, you know, does the eye glow thing, and the implication from that point on is that immediately he's like, I'm going to help the kid. I'm going to help the kid get back to the others, and they can take him to this, you know, promised land or whatever. So, you know.
Yeah. The one trick that he pulls off that I did appreciate the visuals of is they've got a camera trained on him, hooked up all his computer gear and whatnot. And then we see the camera freeze, like it's just got the kid sitting in the chair. And then Adam Driver looks at the screen, looks back up in the room, and the kid's standing up, and he realizes, oh, you've faked the video feed. And that's when the door to his like separate room opens up, and Adam Driver's like, well, this kid's clearly on some level of godlyhood, so I better just do what he says, and walks into the room anyway.
Yeah, but you get the idea that once he sees what's in the kid's eyes, he does sort of want to help him. Like, it's not just, you know, like, it feels like, you know, he wants to help. And, like, I do think this is a little bit easy, maybe. But at the same time, though, I do think, like, an action sequence where, like, our main characters try and break him out would have felt out of tone for the movie, for sure. So, it's a little bit of a weird place to put it in. I think my bigger thing, though, is just that it felt like there should be more of an obstacle, more of because, you know, Adam Driver even says to them when he gives the kid back, he's like, hey, they know the location you're going because I already figured it out, so they know where you're going, they've got blocks everywhere, you're never going to get there. And the kid says, oh, I think I can help. And I'm like, oh, that sounds like fun. We're going to get a cool action sequence when they're trying to drive in and the kid, you know, messes with their, you know, tech or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
It ends up just being like one roadblock they drive through, and that's pretty much it. The kid just runs out and like runs to the location from there, and you know, it's a lot simpler and easier than I think I was expecting based on the build up.
Yeah, everything from the Adam Driver like going into the room and saying, "Okay, how can I help?" to basically the end of the movie. Everyone feels a lot more passive than I was expecting. Like on both sides. It's not like the military has set up roadblocks, but it doesn't feel like they are. I don't know how specific this latitude and longitude is, like if they know the exact square meter this is going to be at or not. But it feels like they set up these roadblocks and then that's it. That's the only major obstacle they have. But then even from our main people, like their idea is we're going to drive through the roadblock. We're going to let you out of the car, Kirsten Dunst and the kid. And then Joel Edgerton and Michael Shannon are going to lead the rest of the military away on kind of a wild goose chase. So they're not looking for you. And like, it doesn't feel like there's anything significant happening here. I mean, the kid eventually starts powering up, but Michael Shannon, like, it doesn't feel like there is even like a time limit they're trying to reach to. It just feels like we're going to drive until we get caught. And it doesn't have the same stakes or tension that I felt like the rest of the movie really had up till that point.
Yeah, it just feels a bit too simple. I think when Adam Driver says you'll never get through, and it felt like a call to action where the kid's like, I can help. I felt like it was leading me to think it was going to be a much bigger deal. And it almost felt like, oh, you oversold that by having him say that.
Yeah. To be clear, all he does is he's been keeping track of radio chatter, and he knows that this road that they're taking is the lightest in terms of troop protection. That's all he does.
Yeah, pretty much. And there's like a little sort of like moment before the thing happens where Shannon says to Edgerton, hey, you can leave now if you want. You've done enough. And he's like, no, I'm in this. And, you know, they all hug and whatever else. But, yeah, I think once we get to the moment, though, I do love it again because, it gets to the location. We get the blast of light, the bubble starts to expand, and we see these structures, which at first it's like, okay, there's a few structures in this field. That's whatever. But once it starts cutting around and the bubble gets bigger and you go back to the aerial shot to see how big this bubble is that people are seeing all this, and we get to a city and there's structures like on top of other structures that we've got, or in between, and everyone's like, what the hell is this? What's going on? I think that stuff is really interesting and just so different from any other like type of like, sending an alien back home. It's usually just a spaceship that shows up and takes them or something like that, or maybe it'll be a portal or some kind. This felt a little bit more unique to do it this way, and I think the visuals do hold up. They look really good. They feel very kind of, they've got that sense of wonder to it, where the movie's kind of shifted from the intense thriller to the wonder as it's went on. And I do think wonder's the right tone they should have here. I think this payoff should be the moment of wonder. It should be the moment of, oh crap, this was all real and this is something else entirely. And of course it all kind of caps off with these like beings of light that are just kind of like blobs of light within like the little blobs of light where the eyes would be, kind of coming towards the kid and like taking him away, and then everything obviously disappears ultimately. But
yeah, it's like vaguely humanoid. You can kind of see the outline of like where a person would be, but it's mostly just like a single ball of light just floating through.
Yeah, so like I think all that stuff's really cool. The follow-ups to it, which is like Edgerton being interrogated and like the guy just being like, you expect us to believe this, this, and this, and he's like, yep, because that's what happened. I'll keep saying the same thing. You saw the same shit I did.
Yeah, that's the part I love the most about it. Is they're just like, and so you're saying that this big bald thing, like all the buildings were that, and he's like, yeah, you saw it. It was there. What are you even questioning here? Like, that happened.
Yeah, but then Adam Driver comes in to speak to him, and there's obviously they met each other already, and it's kind of like, oh, I don't know what this is going to result in, but it's kind of an implication that he will at least make his life easier or something.
Yeah, something we skipped over was that when Adam Driver delivers the kid, he specifically asked them to frame it of like, hey, can you like, you got handcuffs, can you handcuff me so I can at least pretend that I was forced into it and like I didn't just willingly take this kid out of captivity. And they do, so he's able to get let back in, but then yeah, they had to keep up the story of him saying like, hi, I'm Adam Driver, and Joel Edgerton's like, I don't believe we've met before. Well, hello, new person.
Yep. Kirsten Dunst is like cutting her hair in a public bathroom somewhere, so she's starting a new life. And obviously Shannon's also in prison, and the final scene of the movie is him watching the sunrise from the hallway in the prison. But nobody's got a couple of sensors on his head, which is interesting to me.
Yeah.
Because it seems to me that they think that, like, you know, Alton, right, the son, the kid, that he might still like communicate with his father in some way, and they want to try and like capture that or like capture the readings. And there is a moment here as he's watching the sun where he kind of smiles and you see his eyes kind of glow a little, you know, just a little, not nowhere near as strong as the kids ever did, but this idea that maybe, you know, like he can still reach out to his father and maybe his mother as well, and like, you know, let them know he's okay or something, kind of thing.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I wasn't immediately getting that thing of the what is it, the electrodes, these little sensors or whatever, were like keeping track of him for that. Honestly, what I was kind of getting from it was like he was on death row and he was going to like the chair.
Oh, really?
Like this was his like final sunshine. Yeah, because like it didn't look like the wires were really hooked up to anything, but I figured, you know, this is where the electrodes are going to get plugged in for his thing. And it would give that idea of, you know, he basically gave his life for the fact of his son being able to get out. And they did specifically say like, oh, these, you know, this form of treason and all this crazy stuff you did, it's going to result in the death penalty.
I mean, that actually might be what it's going for. I kind of took it as like there's still a connection to his son in some way, and I assumed that this was about letting him, like they were trying to capture this and they were going to keep using him to try and to connect to this other world, because, you know, once the government knows this is there, they're going to want to try and get to it and exploit it as much as they possibly can. But honestly, your read of it doesn't sound that, you know, that sounds pretty plausible actually as well. So I'm not really sure. Maybe this is them giving him the privilege of one last sunrise before his final day.
Yeah,
kind
it's
of
like
thing.
His final walk or whatever it is. Like, what other reason would he have to be out of his cell at this point? Like, well, he's just standing there fully chained up. That's why
my mind went to, oh, they're using him. They want him to, like, you know, try and like connect mentally to this other world or something. I don't know. But you may be right. I think that's actually a sensible read on it. Although I feel like they wouldn't put those on his head if they were going to electrocute him until he's like in the room with the chair and that. But, you know, whatever.
That's why I wasn't like totally confident in it. I'm like, that's just the way I'm reading it. But yeah, it makes more sense to apply it when he's actually in the room.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I find the movie still pretty satisfying in the end, and I think the first half is stronger. It has a good sense of like tension. There's a good, like, I mean, and even that scene with the, like, after the kid's been taken and they're driving through the traffic, the anxious feeling that you get like the entire time as they're trying to get to him, the desperation in the body language is really well done. I do think there's a couple of conventional things going to Act 3, and like getting to the location at the end does feel a bit too easy. That would be my main critiques. But overall, I do think it's pretty damn good, and I feel quite happy with it. And this is my second time watching it as well, so so I think I'm a bit more positive than you, but at the same time, like I don't think this is, when we eventually do like a top sci-fi of the 2010s, which I think I did do one with Tara a long time ago, but I'm sure we'll do one at some point again. I do think it'll have a place somewhere on my list. I'm not saying top 10 of the 2010s by any means, but certainly, if we're doing a top 25, I absolutely think it's maybe sneaking in there. So,
all right, fair enough. I mean, if the competition is the later half of the Transformers movie, yeah, it's probably above that. I'm not gonna argue that point.
There's lots of good sci-fi movies from the 2010s. Stop being frivolous.
Yeah. No, I mean, I said pretty much everything I needed to say up front, is that I think this is a decently made movie. I think that it is even a good movie, but it does just kind of fall into that same generic territory for me, where as much as they occasionally do like a cool scene or something like that, I didn't feel like I was being as captivated by probably the entire back half compared to the front half. I think that there was just a major drop off there for me that just it didn't manage to recover from. So I'm slightly more negative than you, but with how we do points, I'm sure I'll still somehow be on the exact same level.
David, what are you rating Midnight Special?
I'm not going to hem and haw about this. I've been thinking about it since the beginning of the review. I am giving this one a 7.
Okay.
I think I can see the good in it. I think that it is on the level of good, but I think there is just enough in this where I was bouncing between the 6.5 and the 7, and I ended up at the 7, but there was no way it was ever going to get any higher than that for me.
No, that's fair. Yeah, I think I definitely am more in kind of the 8 range. I probably not any higher than a flat 8, but like I think it is into that 8 territory. It's that sort of great range where I think there's just enough atmosphere and kind of vibes to the whole thing, and kind of like an inspirational side to it as well, of like these people coming together to help this kid who is different, and that there's always something that's a little bit kind of like heartwarming about that, against all the odds, and being willing to go to prison to make sure this kid can get to go where they're, it's all about the sacrifice of a parent being willing to like give up everything to make sure their kid can have whatever they need and all that stuff. But I think that's why the Joel Edgerton character probably sticks out to us a little bit more than either of the parents do, is because he's someone who comes to believe it and supports it despite the fact that he's not the parent. He's willing to do it all despite not having that direct, natural parental link to the kid. So yeah, it's nice to get to some of that. So yeah, 8 out of 10 for me. And it's a solid movie. I would recommend it. So all right, well, obviously David's got his homework movie, which we'll get to in a bit, but just before we do that, I'll just say that if you did enjoy the show and you want to get more and support the show and the other shows we do, like Collector's Cut, where we work through movie franchises, we're doing Superman season right now, which kind of weirdly slightly ties into this. We also, of course, have done Mission Impossible franchise. We're doing 70s thrillers soon. We do kind of seasons of movies on there. You can support all of this via Patreon, patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, or via YouTube membership if that's more your thing, and get bonus shows that we do. We do 2 bonus monthly shows, me and David. One's called the Criterion Cut, where we do movies from the Criterion Collection, and then the other one is called Extra Reels, where we do some of the worst things ever made. For example, for June, Steel, the Shaq movie, Shaquille O'Neal, like his, again, also loosely related to Superman. It should actually be more related to Superman than it is, but, mistakes were made.
My fiance just needed some background noise recently, and we popped on Celebrity Family Feud.
Yes.
And Shaq was on that as one of the contestants, and I was like, I'm not okay with this. We need to skip this episode just for now.
I love the idea. The first question is, we polled 100 people to name the first metal they could think of. Shaq buzzes in, Steel.
Yeah. We polled 100 people. What is the worst movie that it was made in the 90s.
There's worse. There's worse than Steel.
Yeah.
We've reviewed some of them. I'm sure of it.
We have.
But yeah, so you can support all the stuff. Any support in any way is greatly appreciated. There's also bonuses for Screams After Midnight and anything other shows we do. So check out Patreon or YouTube membership. If you want to do a one-time thing with a super thanks or something like that, that's also greatly appreciated. Any support keeps everything going. Thank you very much. We greatly appreciate you taking the time to listen to the show and enjoy it. But yes, before we head out, David has a homework movie every week. He goes back and watches one of the films that we did on the show before he joined the Ace, and so he can catch up. So David, what was this week's homework movie?
Well, I decided to dive deep into the archives for the first time in forever. I don't have something that I really need to work towards. So I went ahead and I decided, well, what's another movie of the government being aware of extraterrestrial beings and wanting to keep track of them? I chose Men in Black as my homework for this one.
I felt a pivot coming. I thought, okay, he's making it sound like it's E.T. I don't even know if you've done that already. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't.
I've done E.T. already. Yeah.
Okay.
We did the whatever list. I had to do E.T.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I've already seen Men in Black. I've seen it several times. This is not a new viewing for me. I will say it's the first within at least 5 years. It's been a little bit. I guess new comments in terms of things that I got out of this viewing is I was surprised at how tightly written the entire script is. Like, they do exactly the one plot and nothing else, and everything else just functions on working towards that plot. And it does it in a great way. The practical effects with the aliens definitely still hold up. The special effects, the visual effects are a little bit more dicey, but I think it still is fine. It still holds up decently for what it needs to be. The humor also still manages to hold up. All in all, I would guess I understand why the studios still really want Men in Black to work, because it is something where these initial ones still hold up, and it's something that they could easily tap back into, just hoping that they can make lightning strike again in that way.
Right. Did you say initial ones? Are you implying the second movie isn't dog shit?
My memory says no. It's been over a decade since then, so I'm sure it is actually not as good as I even somewhat remember it to be.
To be fair, I was pretty lukewarm even on the first one when we did it for the show. Like, I feel like this is one that's declined for me as time has went on. That said, though, aside from that one great scene where Tommy Lee Jones gives this speech about humanity, and it's like the best written scene in the whole movie, and I don't know why that happened, but he's like, oh, you know, a person is smart, but a group of people, they're idiots. Like, and he gives this whole speech, and I'm like, this is like a speech we should have like before every election or something. Like, this is a great speech. Like, why is it in the middle of a Men in Black movie?
Yeah. And then he immediately goes into the stuff of like, you know, everyone knew the Earth went around the sun. Everyone knew the world was flat, and today you knew that there were no other aliens on planet Earth or whatever. Think about what you'll know tomorrow. It's like that entire scene is just like, the writers have decided to be whatever. Oh, that was one other thing that I picked up on this time. It said based on the Marvel comic by whoever. I didn't realize this was a Marvel comic to begin with.
I knew
that
it
was far more intriguing to me.
I don't think I knew it was a Marvel comic. I knew it was based on a comic, but that details something. I mean, I probably knew it the last time I watched the movie, but I'd forgotten. But,
right. Yeah. But no, I enjoyed it growing up. I thought it was a good movie. It had some good humor to it. Obviously, I'm not going to pretend it hasn't aged. There's obviously some dated references there, but it still is a good time. I still have fun with it. So I think I'm probably going to be up in, I'll say 7.5 territory. Sure. I think it's up there.
Yeah, I think it's just a taste thing more than anything. I think it's just a little bit in the zanier side for my taste. And I think, well, I liked it a lot as a kid for various reasons. I think as an adult, I wasn't clicking with it quite as much.
Yeah, that's fair.
Oh, did you enjoy seeing From the Last Seduction, your favorite 90s erotic thriller, The Leading Lady?
You act like I was like miserable during that movie.
You gave it like a 4.
Like it. Yeah, I just didn't like it. It's not like it was her fault specifically. But yeah, no, honestly, she wasn't that great in this one either. Like, she was a fine enough leading lady for what it is, but there was this extra, like, I don't know. It felt like she was trying to be on Will Smith's level in terms of like the sass and the confidence, and I'm like, no, we can't have two of those in one movie. Let Will Smith handle that, and you just be your own thing.
All right, no, just pointing out the connection, since there was something we did on a collector's cut season last year.
The connection for me was I recently have been watching through some old Twin Peaks like videos and stuff like that, and the fireman character showing up.
Yes.
In this, I was like, oh, hey, that's shocking. I mean, makes sense. He's barely seems human, but he's here.
All right, well, there you go. That brings an end to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. Thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate it. Keep watching science fiction. Also, I'm supposed to tell you what's coming next week. Oh, yeah, we're doing Companion next episode.
Ah, yes.
So look forward to that. But that's next week on the show. I'm sure most people probably clicked off because they thought I was just doing the regular outro and didn't hear that.
You could say
whatever.
Anything now. You could announce like a sweepstakes and nobody would know.
Yes. Computer ad salsa.